I have been saying for months that everything other than the economy for the American voters is a total distraction. Voters are not, I have said, going to show up at the polls in November overwhelmingly and vote based on foreign policy, because honestly, they never actually do. You know, you can look back at the years in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that proves it. They're not going to vote on culture war issues because, as I said in a segment last week, things are so bad economically that they cannot focus on anything else. And a new poll conducted by GLAAD shows that a vast majority of Americans do not care about these other issues. They only care about the economy. Let me read you these results. Only 8% of voters labeled trans issues as a top concern. Why is that important? Well, considering the fact that you've got Republicans, including the president, out there right now, and Stephen Miller, trying to somehow label James Tallarico down in Texas as transgender, or saying that he's too into trans issues. Voters are like, we don't care. And also, no, he's not, but we don't care. Republicans last week announced their little midterm messaging. Democrats are for transing mice. And voters like, first of all, no, they're not. Second of all, we don't care if they are because we can't afford food. 44% of registered voters in the poll said that inflation and the increasing cost of living are their number one concern. Almost 75% of people polled said they would support a midterm candidate who says we all deserve the freedom to live our lives without fear or discrimination. 70% would prefer a candidate who focused more on lowering the cost of living than focusing on trans issues and restricting trans rights. In fact, 65% of respondents in the poll said that they felt that politicians often scapegoat trans people as a distraction from other issues. So all of these culture war issues that Republicans have been running on for decades aren't working. In fact, if anything, they're almost having the opposite effect now, because you have vast majorities, 3/4 of the country, saying, I would vote for somebody who said everybody should have rights. And the government shouldn't restrict those rights just based on who you are, your sexuality, your religion. We don't care. We want everybody to have equal rights. Over 70% of the public says that. So the culture wars may be over, or I think more likely, unfortunately, is that this is a temporary ceasefire. As I mentioned last week, and I think it's worth reiterating again, culture war issues can work. Foreign policy issues can work when everything in your house, and I mean literally in your house, is working perfectly. If you've got a good job and no fear of losing that job, you got savings account, you've paid off your credit card debt, your home mortgage isn't, over 5%, and your life is doing great, you're not worried about the economy. What you are worried about are foreign terrorists. What you are worried about are transgenders in the women's sports. That's when those things work. The economy was getting better in 2024. Inflation was bad, sure, but it was coming down steadily. So Republicans leaned into the culture war issues and won the day. Can't say that this year. After 9/11, everybody's worried about a terrorist lurking around the corner to kill them. So that worked. They ran on that for years and years and years until they couldn't anymore. Why? Because the economy went to shit. And suddenly, the threat of a terrorist around every corner wasn't what voters were concerned about, because they can't even afford to drive around the corner anymore. So all of these little Republican tricks that we have seen over the decades can work if everything else is working perfectly in your life. And that's what this poll proves. So Republicans are going to go out there, and the culture wars, I promise you, are going to be nastier than ever this year. But all it's going to serve to do is remind voters that Republicans have no plan on how to make the economy better. And Democrats, for the love of God, don't get sucked into it. Don't. I know that sounds weird, right? Should we not go out there and say that we're allies with the LGBTQ community? Yes, we should. And we should always be allies. We shouldn't even have to be allies because they shouldn't be persecuted at all. But if you're out there talking about anything other than the economy, you're losing. That's what voters want to hear. They're tuning out the nonsense. Democratic candidates have to do the same.